Tonight, we are doing a webinar with a good friend and a guest. George Adams of Housatonic Bloodstock is going to come in, and we're going to do a talk about pedigrees. And George will be the main thrust of the conversation. Just some housekeeping keeping items. Feel free to ask questions. Use the chat functionality that's below. If you have questions as George's going along and doing his talk, I will moderate the questions and ask the questions for you. If you are dialing in only, we will at the end open up the phone lines. Right now, everyone is on mute so that there's not a lot of background noise. So we will we'll open up the phone lines at the end so that if you are just calling in and you don't have the chat functionality, you can do that. But for everyone else that's on, feel free to ask questions as we go along, and I will interject them and as George is doing his thing. So without further ado, I hand it over to Mr. George, and it is his show.
All right. Well, thank you, TK. Thank you for asking me to come on and do this webinar. The topic is pedigrees, which is quite wide-ranging. I am going to focus mostly on some research techniques where you can find the types of information that will help you analyze a pedigree yourself. And I assume at the end there will be some more specific questions I'm happy to answer then or after the fact via email or Slack, anything like that. But the goal will be to make it so you all can do some of this research yourself in the future. Unfortunately, a lot of the information is accessible if you pay for it. I will show some free techniques and point out when they're less free. But yeah, hopefully it'll be informative. We're going to use
Keep going, George.
We're going to use participate as an example for most of this, because she has kind of a neat pedigree, so it lends itself to some of what we'll be talking about. So we're going to start. Get this up here. So you should all be looking at the past performances for participate. The relevant portion is right in the middle. It says participate owner Wasabi Ventures Stables, and then it says BM5 February. And so she's a bay mare. She's 5 years old. She was foaled in February. So her sire is Include, and his sire is Broad Brush, and Include stood for $7,500 when Participate was conceived. Participate's dam, Wings of the Storm, is sired by Valley Crossing. So a couple of terminology things. We would say that Participate is by Include and out of Wings of the Storm, because she was literally foaled out of Wings of the Storm and sired by Include. Valley Crossing in this instance would be what we would refer to as the broodmare sire of Participate. If we were going to refer to Broad Brush, which we wouldn't sort of typically, he would be the grandsire of Participate. So Participate is by Include out of Wings of the Storm by Valley Crossing. When TK calls me up and says, George, we got this new mare, what do you think of her pedigree? This is the first thing I look up, and then I would go to, and make sure that it, TK, do you see the pedigree query website now, or is it still on?
No, George, it's still on the PP. If you do the reshare, you can switch to the other.
There we go. All right. Sorry, everybody. Here we go. All right. So you should now see this website is called pedigreequery.com. This portion of it is free. You can get a 5-cross pedigree of any horse for free. 5-cross refers to the fact that you see 5 generations of Participates or any horse's ancestors. So working left to right, Participate Sire Include is in the biggest blue box. Her dam Wings of the Storm is in the biggest pink box underneath that. And then working back. So Include Sire is Broadbrush, his dam is Illyria. Wings of the Storm's Sire is Valley Crossing, her dam is December Ember, and so forth. Couple of other things you can notice on here. Over towards the right-hand side, there are 4 little teal squares, each of them appearing at the line next to turn 2, with Ireland in parentheses, which designates that turn 2 was foaled in Ireland. So what those little teal boxes are showing you is that Participate is inbred 5 by 5 by 5 by 5 to turn 2. So inbreeding is when the same ancestor appears in both the sire's pedigree and the dam's pedigree within 5 generations of the horse that we're talking about. So Participate, and in her 5th generation, you have turn 2, and he appears 4 times, which is a lot. Especially for turn 2 to appear that many times. As you'll see, Include himself would be inbred 4 by 4 by 4 to turn 2, because in his pedigree, the 3 teal boxes on the top half are in his 4th generation. If a horse appears in a pedigree beyond the 5th generation on both halves of the pedigree, that's no longer called inbreeding, that's called line breeding. There are some people who are big fans of line breeding and believe in line breeding, attempting to accumulate as many different lines of the same horse, or certain horses, specific horses, as you can within a pedigree, and they think that there's some utility to that. Similar to inbreeding, it's virtually impossible these days, Participate being a notable exception, it's virtually impossible to find horses these days that are not inbred to either or both of Northern Dancer and Mr. Prospector, especially in the US and in Europe. They have less Mr. Prospector, but a lot of Northern Dancer. So we'll talk a little bit more about inbreeding later. Just a couple of other terms that you might hear. Inbreeding typically happens with male horses, with stallions, just because of the nature of breeding. A stallion nowadays can have 200 foals in the northern hemisphere and then 200 more foals in the southern hemisphere, whereas a mare can only have 1 foal a year, no matter what. So just by a function of biology, inbreeding is more common to male horses than it is to female horses. When you have inbreeding to female horses, that's referred to as Rasmussen factor inbreeding. There was Leon Rasmussen was a pedigree guru who argued that inbreeding to superior females was a successful or worthy goal of planning matings. That's not necessarily the case, not always the case, but sometimes can be, just like with male horses. Inbreeding to some horses is more productive than others. But so anyway, this is a 5-cross pedigree for Participate. There's a lot of names on there. Pedigree Query puts up some other statistics. This is not an official jockey club or racing sanctioned website. This used to be just it's sort of like Wikipedia. Users add the information themselves. It's much more accurate now, I assume, like Wikipedia. But if you want to they do offer other, you can look at more extended pedigrees, up to about 9 generations. You can do hypothetical matings where you say, okay, what will this 5-cross pedigree look like if I mate Participate to Irish War Cry, the new stallion they announced yesterday is coming to Maryland. You have to pay $10 a year for those, so it's no longer free at that point, but that is available there. All right, so we've now looked at the 5-cross pedigree here. We noticed that there's this fairly rare and extensive inbreeding to turn 2, which it turns out is actually a pretty successful pattern for Include. generally speaking, but we'll get to a little bit more of that later. If I was going to delve deeper into this and find out a little bit more other than just the names of these horses, a good free way to do that, I could go to the Blood Horse website, and they have a tab for sales, which allows you to search all sale results. In this case, I entered all sales and I put Wings of the Storm in as the dam in that search. And these are my search results. I have 2 horses. Gino Green was sold at the Fasig-Tipton Mid-Atlantic September sale in 2007 as a yearling. And Any Darn Day was sold at the Fasig-Tipton Mid-Atlantic December sale in 2017, although 2017, the Mid-Atlantic actually held that same sale twice, once in January and then again in December. So this is actually the January version of the sale. But anyway, so what this then allows me to do is I can say, okay, I want to look at this pedigree, a catalog style pedigree that'll give me some more information. So I'm going to go to the Fasig-Tipton website where I can pull up the catalog from either of these sales for either of these horses. And I'm going to use the 2017 sale because it's the more recent sale. So the information will be more current and more useful. So I did that. I went to the Fasig-Tipton website. This is the winter mix sale of 2017. I searched for Wings of the Storm as the dam. It turns out that there were actually 2 siblings to participate in this sale. Her older sister, Loveheart, scratched out of the sale, although she was cataloged, and then the half brother, Any Darn Day, did go through the ring and was sold as a racing age prospect. So if I click either of those hip numbers, it will pull up a catalog page. We're going to do Any Darn Day now. So we see a similar, this is only a 3-cross pedigree because we see 3 different, or we go back 3 generations for Any Darn Day. Obviously, he's by Any Given Saturday, whereas Participate is by Include. But the catalog style pedigree focuses on the female family. The stallion information is much easier to find. We'll get to that in a little bit. It's the Stallion Register. It's online and there's a print copy, but the female family information is the stuff that's harder to find. So this is a catalog page. This would have been January of 2017. So it's a year and a half outdated at this point. You see Participate doesn't appear here under Wings of the Storm, the first dam. Excuse me. Because she hadn't done enough to make it up there yet. A couple other terms, excuse me, that are important. I know on Slack it's been discussed a couple times recently. The term black type. In breeding with females, it's very important to have as much black type in the pedigree as close as possible. They've done studies. Black type mares are the best brood mares. Mares that could run make the best producers. They also, when you're looking to breed commercially, the more black type, the more commercial a page is going to be. So a horse earns black type when it finishes first, second, or third in a stakes race, whether it's a graded stakes race, a listed stakes race, or a restricted stakes race, as long as it meets certain conditions, which you can see when you look at results. Sometimes the name of the race will appear such and such a stakes, and then in parentheses it'll say NB, which means non-black type. So that race, although it was a name, probably had a bigger purse. That doesn't count for black type purposes. It wouldn't appear, it wouldn't be named in a catalog. Good example of this is the Maryland Million starter handicap that Participate won last year on Maryland Million Day. It's a named race, had a bigger purse, but it was a non-black type event. So she, and I'll show you her catalog style pedigree that includes her later, she does not have black type. She just appears like Loveheart and Gino Green here under Wings of the Storm in regular font. Having said that, they do have a sibling, Any Court in a Storm, who placed in a stakes race, 3 stakes races, excuse me. And so he has black type. So Participate is a half sister to a stakes placed winner, which is one of the things, along with her own racing ability, that makes her a interesting broodmare prospect for you all. I just use the term half sister. So in racehorses, we only refer to horses as siblings if they share the same mother, the same dam. As I mentioned before, a stallion can have 200 foals a year or more. There's no utility to referring to two of those 200 horses as siblings because there's so many of them, and it's sort of virtually meaningless. So half siblings would be participate in any of the three horses right there, any Court in a Storm, Love Heart, and Gino Green, participate as a half sister to all three of those horses because they have the same dam, Wings of the Storm, but they have different sires. Participate is by Include, any Court in a Storm is by Successful Appeal, and Love Heart and Gino Green are both by Lionheart. That makes Love Heart and Gino Green full siblings as opposed to half siblings because they have the same dam and the same sire. Another term that you'll sometimes hear is three-quarter siblings. So that would be the horses would have the same dam, and one of them is sired by, say, Lionheart, and the other one is sired by either Lionheart's sire, Tail of the Cat, or by a son of Lionheart. And that would make them three-quarter siblings. The term just means, oh, here comes the monsoon. That just means that they're sort of closer than half siblings, but not quite full siblings. Just a term you might hear kicked around. So this is the catalog page from that sale. You see, if we go further back down, second dam participates. Second dam, but in this case, Any Darn Day's second dam is December Ember. She is by Lord Gaylord. She's the dam of 6 winners, and that includes 2 stakes winners, the Stakes Scam and Polish Rifle. They both appear in bold capitals. Another stakes placed winner, December Thunder. So she didn't win a stakes race, but she finished second or third. That's why she doesn't have the caps, but has the bold. And then down below, Road to Hannah is also on there under the second dam. She is the dam of, well, on this page, it was a stakes winner and 2 other stakes place horses. I think there might be 2 stakes winners under there now in a stakes place. But anyway, that's a fairly strong second dam there. 2 stakes winners, stakes place winner, and then a stakes producer as well. The third dam, going a little bit further back, was also a stakes winner. She's got the bold capitals, and a fairly solid family back there. A couple of other things just to notice. Stake Scam, all of his stakes wins and placings were in listed or restricted stakes races. Polish Rifle, you can see on the second line there, it says second Laurel Futurity, and then there's a bold G3 in brackets. The G3 is grade 3, so the graded races are the best races. Grade 3, grade 2, and then grade 1 are the absolute best. So you want black type, and the more graded black type, the better, generally speaking, on a page. So you see Polish Rifle there was second in a grade 3. Down below, Tell a Great Story was third in a grade 2. Give No Quarter was third in a grade 2. So that's you like to see that. You also see for all of the stakes horses down there, they do list the stallions that they were sired by, which is useful. They don't do it for the dams there. Lady Holiday, 7 wins, and she's a producer. So, I mean, she's had foals race. They haven't earned black type, otherwise it would appear there. Her sire is enlisted. Road to Hannah's sire is enlisted. She never ran. We'll see it elsewhere, but you could go back to Pedigree Query and look up either of those if you wanted to for free and see who they're sired by. We know that they're out of December Ember, but if you were interested, you could go back to Pedigree Query for free and find that. You could also go to like Equibase and look them up in Equibase. It would be there. But the catalog page is a good place to start because it gives you a sort of very quick general idea of how strong the family is and how deep the family is. Deep means how far back is their black type, as opposed to, you know, the first dam was a stakes winner, but the second dam wasn't a stakes winner or a stakes producer other than that first dam, and there's nothing in the third dam either. Those pages, obviously they would have black type, so that's good, but they would not be as deep as this page, for example. Let's see, another way to look at some of this information is the mare produce records. This is Equine Line, is this website. This program, the Mare Produce Records, is a subscription service. It's $200 or $300 a year. For somebody in the bloodstock business, it is invaluable because when TK tells me participate, I just go and plug her name in there, generate this for the dam of the entered horse, and this is what I get. It's different. It's a different format than the catalog page. It's the same information and more. You can see every foal that Wings of the Storm produced, the year of the stallion, their birth dates, which is sometimes helpful if when you're thinking about buying a mare and she hasn't had a foal every year. Sometimes if you see there were late birthdays the year before, they may have just given the mare a year off to try and get an earlier foal the next year. It doesn't necessarily mean the mare had reproductive issues, which is something you generally try and avoid in a brood mare. So this first page, it lists all of the horses out of Wings of the Storm. If they sold in a sale, it'll tell you the sale price, the most recent sale price that they fetched. It tells you how much they've earned at the racetrack, their best race class. So their W is winner, NS is non-starter, P is placed, BPW is black type placed winner, U is unplaced, and then the speed figures are, I believe they use the Equibase figures, you know, similar to the buyer speed figures, things like that. So you can get a general sense of the class of the page from this class of the family from this program. It does designate graded versus just black type. So if we were to look up, we were to do December Ember here, it'll specify that there's a graded black type for, oh, it doesn't, because they were stakes winners and they only played 200. So if we scroll down, there's a lot more to this. It actually lists the details of those sales, what sale it was, who consigned them, who bought them, the sale average. So you could see if the horse, you know, brought a lot more or a lot less than the average price at that sale. It might be informative. So that's, a lot of her foals have sold, including Road to Hannah brought $145,000 just this past January in Kentucky. All right, so then they have a full race record for every horse out of the mare. So here's Stakes Scam, one of those stakes winners. So he had 2, he started 8 times. He didn't win at 2, but he was second 4 times, third twice, and so on and so forth. Made 19 starts at 3 and 17 at each of 4 and 5. They don't do that anymore. He managed to win 8 races, placed in another 28 races, earned $365,000. You see there, it says first, his total 62 races, 8 wins. The 2 in parentheses means 2 of those wins were black type wins, including one on the turf. They then break out the horse's record on the turf for you. So he was a stakes winner on dirt and turf. And then down below, it gives you the breakdown for all of his stakes victories and placings in the races and the value of those races. So back in the day, $30,000 purse was a stakes purse. I think it has to be at least 50 now, but this horse was born in 1994, so we're talking about the 90s, so it's a little different then. He also set a new course record at Colonial, going 9 furlongs. So that's something else to tuck in your brain. You scroll through, it's the same type of information for the other horses out of the mare. This is always my first stop when I'm doing research for a horse. It's an easier way to find an auction, to go find a catalog page if that's what I want, but I find it more useful to just go back and search enter them in the dams, the second dam, third dam, and the sisters. So the links over here, the hyperlinks, is for the fillies in the family. So you could search their produce records as well and get the same type of information for them as well. Let's see. Oh. Switch now to, that's the female family. So if you were looking at participate as a broodmare prospect, and what we'll look at when we, assuming she makes it into the Wasabi broodmare band, and we try and pick a stallion for her next year, one of the things we'll look at is what sire lines have worked with the family. So you see here, the black type horses are by successful appeal. He's still standing at stud. We could look him up in the Stallion Register. Stake Scam is by Carnivale, who is a Northern Dancer horse. Polish Rifles by Polish Numbers, who is a Danzig horse, who's a son of Northern Dancer. Thunder Rumble is not around anymore. He goes back to Prince Aquilo on the top side, though. Tail male would be a term. So if we go back to that 5-cross pedigree from before, include, you would say he goes tail male to Armageddon. So that's all the way along the top of that pedigree, as opposed to tail female. So Wings of the Storm goes tail female to Bedbug down there on the bottom. And you can take that sort of further back, tail male and tail female. It just means that sire line and dam line without sort of jumping around in that pedigree. Other terms you might hear, the way that thoroughbred breeders sort of talk about it, tail male and tail female are more important than other placements on the page. Genetically, I don't know how accurate that is, but thoroughbred isn't always about accuracy. It's about how it's always been done, and it's always been done that tail female and tail male are more important. All right, so we'll switch over to stallions now. The Stallion Register, so it comes in print. It used to only be in print. It's this big, giant, thick phone book looking thing. Yes, other people have. If you subscribe to the Blood Horse, they send you this every year. It used to read this cover to cover when I had much less to do. Now it's a good research tool. Just about everything that you can find in here is online, and I'll pull that website up in a second. It's the Blood Horse Stallion Register page. The one useful thing that is in the print version that is not online, they have a pedigree index, cross-index to pedigrees. You can look up, so a minute ago we saw that Participate is a half-sister to a stakes place winner by successful appeal. So, okay, are there any stallions out there that have successful appeal and then that we could breed Participate to try and duplicate that cross? So you go through here and look it up. The answer is that other than successful appeal himself, who does stand at stud in Kentucky still for, I think, $6,500, he does not appear in anybody else's pedigree in this whole book. But yeah, that's probably not a direction we'd go. Successful appeal is very useful. Stallion has some fertility issues, is getting older now. I don't know if it's fertility as much as a picky breeder. But anyway, the point is we wouldn't have a lot of options if we wanted to try and duplicate that. Sorry, excuse me. We wanted to try and duplicate that that mating that produced the stakes place half sibling. All right, so if we look up include here, this is the Blood Horse Stallion Register online. You can search every stallion that's in that book. You can search for them here online. Pulled up include, lots of information here. The important thing to keep in mind, this page is a advertising tool for the stallion owner. So it puts everything in the best possible light and doesn't necessarily give all of the information in the order that you would be interested in it as a mare owner. A couple of things that, so the big thing about that, you can look at his recent top performers. The information there is fairly self-explanatory. Rankings, that's what he's done on the national stallion list the last 2 years. The rankings, number 99 national, number 70 national, that's by earnings. That's how stallions are ranked. Typically not the most useful and accurate, but that's the way it's always been done. Sales, it gives his sales results from the last couple of years. Again, things you can go and find. You can pull up specific sales results down there, specific horses. Include actually had a $250,000 and $125,000 yearling at the September sale recently. So those are pretty solid sales results for a fairly old stallion who doesn't get the commercial respect that he deserves. All right. Most of the time, this page, people go here and they do the hypothetical mating to get the nicking report. Before we jump into nicking reports, I do want to point out this statistical summary link there under tools and resources. SH is Southern Hemisphere. We're going to ignore that for the time being, and the straight up statistical summary would be for the Northern Hemisphere. This is what it looks like when you pull that up. It's a lot of information. The most relevant part for my purposes is that include his sired down here, lifetime black type winners as a percentage of foals of racing age. He's got 42 stakes winners, and that's good for 6% of his foals of racing age. Those are really strong numbers. 6% is pretty great. Now, once upon a time, the top sires would get 20, 25% stakes winners. Nowadays, Tappet and Warfront and Curlin are around 10%. 6% is really, really, really good. The breed average, 2.7% of all horses win a stakes race. So 6% is strong. One other statistic that I find very useful is this average earnings index and the comparable index. So those are more means of trying to rank horses. I find them more useful than the earnings tables. What that does, the average earnings index is it takes every horse that has made a start in a year and it puts the average earnings for all of those horses at, that's 1.00. So include has his runners are at 1.49, so he's 50% higher average earnings than the breed average. That number in and of itself is good. It's not great. The really good stallions are up at like 2.5% now or higher. But the average earnings index for my purposes is most useful as a comparison with the comparable index, which is similar to the average earnings index, except for it ranks the average earnings of all of the other foals out of the dams of runners by include. It's complicated. So if Wings of the Storm, for instance, all of her other foals, their baseline or their average earnings would be 1, and then the foals by include would be 1.33. So again, he improves his mares, and the average earnings index compared to the comparable index, only a third of all stallions have a higher average earnings index AEI than a CI. So when you're trying to pick a stallion, if you can pick one that has a higher average earnings index than a comparable index, it means they move their mares up. It means they do better than they should for the opportunities that they've been given. Again, I know there's a lot of information and some of it's sort of dry and complicated, but pedigrees and mating planning is, that's sort of how it works. You take as much information as possible and use it to make the best decision that you think you can. There is no right answer, and sometimes there's probably a wrong answer, but you're trying to come to the best decision possible.
So, George,
Yep.
I was going to ask a question, and this is my question, so not from the crowd. So, but just a question for you, as you absorb all of this info, and you just alluded to that there's a mess load of data here. What is your, and this is a question coming from someone who's thinking like an investor on things, you know, where there's also always a boatload of data, and you have to, what are the 2 or 3 most valuable things that you look for to say, this is a mare that you want to have as a brood mare? This is a filly that eventually is going to be a brood mare. What is it that, what are the 2 or 3 things that are most key to you when you're doing that analysis?
The key thing is the quality of that female family. The catalog page, how much black type is there? How close is it? How much is there going back? That's sort of the be all end all, is the quality of that female family. You know, if you look through the Timonium yearling catalog for next week, there's some, it's not necessarily a lot, but there are some yearlings in there that there's not a single bit of black type on that page. And I don't care how pretty that horse is. I don't care how much that horse goes on to earn. It could win 20 races at Charlestown. And it might even win a stakes race. I would not want that mare in the broodmare band. There's nothing in the pedigree that explains that mare, and there's nothing that would suggest to me that she would then pass it along.
Yeah. I mean, just so I can interject there too, because this is a thread that we had on Slack a couple weeks ago when I was talking about horses that we have that could be broodmare prospects. And, you know, of our female runners that we have now, I made the comment that the only one that we have that really is a great prospect is Participate. And we got some questions about, well, how about Nancy R? You know, because Nancy R, if Nancy wins another race and it's the right race, she's going to eke up around $100,000 in earnings. And, you know, so in of itself is not a bad number. But, you know, and it's a fine career, and she's going to be a profitable horse for us, and all of those things are wonderful. But I had some club members ask, well, why doesn't she make a good broodmare prospect? And I know we talked about it. So that she's a great example of, she's the best horse produced out of her family.
Right.
And she was not black type. She was just a decent, you know, kind of mid-level to low-level runner. And who eked out a career. And that doesn't mean someone may not want her as a broodmare. It just means from a commercial standpoint, she doesn't make a good prospect for us.
And that's the key there too, is commercial versus if you're just breeding, you know, if you were going to race every baby yourself, every foal yourself, if you weren't looking to try and sell some of the foals in an auction on the commercial market to make money that way, you know, you don't have to be as picky. You could say, yeah, Nancy R is a good racehorse. She won, you know, handful of races, earned $100,000. She was tough. I'm gonna breed from her, and you know, you could do that and probably make money as long as you weren't trying to sell the foal, because people will look at the catalog page when you get that horse to the sale, and they'll say, okay, well, she won a race, but she wasn't stakes class. There's nothing else under the first couple of dams that was stakes class. Therefore, the chances that this foal is going to be stakes class those chances are minimal. And to have residual value as a stallion, or, I mean, there's only a handful of male horses that have residual value as a stallion, but to have any residual value, no matter how good they are on the racetrack, a buyer wants to see that black type, wants to see some stake success in the family up fairly close. And that's why Participate is a half to a stakes place winner. So that makes her a more intriguing prospect, even though, you know, she herself hasn't earned any black type yet. Maybe still has a chance, but even if she doesn't, she's half to a stakes place winner, and then she has that very nice deep page behind her, especially for Maryland breds. Again, when you're commercial, you don't want it necessarily to be a regional page. You want to see graded black type on there also, and she has that. Participate does. So that's what makes her an intriguing prospect. Another thing that goes into all of this too is commerciality and then price point. How big is your budget to go and find a mare or a potential brood mare? You have less money, then you're less likely to find a mare with, a deep page and black type up close. That's the level, that's why Songbird brought whatever she brought, 9.5 million. She's a really good racehorse. Not many of us have 9.5 million, and even those of us that do probably shouldn't spend it on one mare, because you're never going to sell a foal out of Songbird for 9.5 million.
Yeah.
But that's a different question. Yeah. That's why Participate is a good prospect, broodmare prospect, and Nancy R. less so. Another, you asked for 2 or 3 things. The page would be the first thing, the female family. The broodmare sire would be, another important aspect. Include is a national stallion. He's sort of known as a filly sire. He doesn't have the broodmare sire statistics yet, but relatively speaking, his daughters are fairly young. You figure he's 20 or so now, or 20 something now. He's still having daughters born now. He's going to have daughters in production for 20 something more years. So that gives him a nice long time to build his broodmare sire statistics. I think he's going to be a very good broodmare sire. He has 9 stakes winners, I think, already as a broodmare sire. Whereas Frisian Fire, the sire of Nancy R., he's a Maryland stallion. He's a useful sire here. He's gotten a couple of stakes winners. He's gotten 2 really nice stakes winners. But his percentages aren't that high, and he's he might still make it, but he wouldn't excite me as much as a brood.
He was like, and I didn't want to talk to him about it. He just kept asking me these complicated, stupid questions.
He's annoying.
And then he got mad at me and hung up.
All right.
He got a B on that paper because he did the wrong piece. Can you believe that?
No.
Rich Samsung S7.
Oh, I see it now. I got it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go back to the Stallion Register and some of the things that we can research there. Look, it includes Stallion page first. This is what the Stallion Register, the paper one, is full of, is pages that look like this. Again, lots and lots of information. You see the 5 cross pedigree or the 4.5 cross pedigree up there. Includes race record because he has a long sire record of his own. They've condensed his race record, figuring that's less important now that he has offspring that people can point to. Stud analysis by foal crop, lots of numbers, named foals, runners, winners, 2-year-old winners, 2-year-old black type winners, and then black type winners generally. You see his percentages there. He had a really good year in 2011. He only had 18 foals. 3 of them won stakes races, good for 17%. So that's pretty solid. But you also notice why Include stands now for $7,500. You can breed to him for less than that. He's just not commercially popular. He's done really well. It's sort of one of those ironies of horse racing. Useful stallions like Include, like Northern Afleet, who just died, like Langfure, they get as many and as good of stakes winners as, well, maybe not Tappet, but they're up there. But because their babies don't sell well, they don't get the number of mares. You see, he's only had 18 foals, 33 foals, 72 foals, 47 foals, 32 foals. Tappet's getting 200 foals a year, or could if they wanted to. I think they breed them a little more judiciously than that. But that's something to keep in mind when you're picking a stallion also, especially if you're going to be commercial. It's less of a concern for us in the Maryland market because even the most popular stallions here are lucky to get 100 mares. But a horse like Include, you might be one of 5 offspring of Include selling that year. So if you have a really good one, people are going to notice it. Whereas if you have a really good really good foal by a first crop stallion from Kentucky, there's going to be 70 other foals in there that you're going to be competing with. That's just something else to keep in mind. As we look at the stallion page, though, it breaks down his results by racing year. He's shuttled a handful of times to the Southern Hemisphere. He was actually the leading sire in Argentina at one point. And you'll notice that's, if we look at the middle column here, it says include his sired, and then it lists the names of all of his stakes winners and their earning, well, the year they were born, their gender. So Sobradora Inc. She was born in 2012. She's a filly. Her dam is by Bernstein. Her second dam is by Roar. Bernstein is the son of Stormcat. Roar is the son of 49er. Those are things you could look up. Those are things that once you have done this a lot, you just start to know. Bernstein also shuttled to Argentina and was a leading sire down there. That's why he shows up as the broodmare sire of a lot of Include's good horses, because the good mares in Argentina were bred to Include while he was down there, and they had good results. So Sobradora Inc. was the champion 3-year-old filly in Argentina. She won the Copa de Plata, which is a grade 1 and a group 1 in Argentina. Enrique Esabal, which is a group 1 in Argentina, etc. Go down to Riker there, because he has that bold A++. What that refers to is the NIC rating, the true NIC rating, as opposed to the ENIC rating or the G1 Goldmine rating. These are all different programs. I'll show you a couple here in a second. So Riker, the cross of Include with an Unreal Zeal mare, is good for an A++. So I actually ran the hypothetical mating. Is this tab here? Hypothetical mating, true NICs. I put Wings of the Storm in just to see what participates NIC rating would be. And it's this tab here. And the answer is an A++. So True NICs is the Blood Horses program. Workmix is a different brand. G1 Goldmine is a different brand. They each have their own, they take the same data, and then they each have their own algorithms that processes that data and decides how successful a cross has been versus how successful they think it should have been. When we talk about crosses and NICs, True NICs and ENICs, these programs really only use two names in the pedigree. They use the sire and the broodmare sire. So in this case, you see here, based on the cross of Include with private account and his sons and grandsons. Sometimes you see based on the cross of Broadbrush and his sons and grandsons with private account and his sons and grandsons. So the data goes into their algorithm, and it each one figures it out differently, and how far back they need to go on the sire line and how far back they need to go on the dam line to give you what they determine to be a statistically relevant data set that they can say, okay, from all of the, and we'll scroll down here. So A++, variant 15.83, that's how they get the A++. That's a strong variant. 1 is a C or a C+, 1.0, that would be average. That would be, it gives you the results that you think. So when you're looking at NICs, by the way, C is not a bad NIC. C is an average NIC, much like grades. I know there's some teachers listening. We can't all be A and B students. Some of us are just C students, and those are average students. So a C rating is not a bad rating necessarily. Having said that, obviously you like to see A++ where possible. So we scroll down, you'll notice those 4 little red squares over there. Those are the same 4 instances of turn to. It's showing us the inbreeding there, like we saw in Pedigree Query at the beginning. All right, so hypothetical, Include with Wings of the Storm. Starters considered and rated cross, the direct sire, broodmare sire cross. So they looked at 3 foals by Include out of Valley Crossing mares. Remember, that's participates broodmare sire. And then their algorithm went back to private account and his sons and grandsons and came up with 17 more starters on the cross. So that would be foals by Include out of mares by private account or by mares by Valley Crossing, or maybe private terms, other sons of private account. So there's this A++ rating is based on 20 foals on the cross. So they said, okay, there's 20 of them. And as we scroll further down, we see 4 of them were stakes winners. So they've said, okay, 4 of This is the starters. The total number of foals is 24 as opposed to 20. But they said, okay, there have been 24 foals, 20 of them have started, 4 of them are stakes winners, so that 20% is where they come up with the A++. Yeah, okay, this is a good nick. And they're not wrong. A couple of things that are not immediately clear as you look at this. So Pannier and St. John's River, the top 2 stakes winners bred on this cross. One was a grade 1 stakes winner and one was a grade 2 stakes winner. They happen to be full sisters, which it doesn't tell you that there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might suggest that it wasn't just the cross. It might have been that mare specifically that worked well with include. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying these are things to keep in mind when you're looking at these nicking reports. Joint return, the third one there, Miss-Inclusive. Those are both Mid-Atlantic runners, as I recall. Both stakes winners by include. One's out of a mare by Brunswick, one's out of a mare by Afternoon Delights, who are a son and a grandson of Private Account, respectively. So 2 graded winners, 2 more stakes winners from only 24 foals. That's pretty solid. That's a decent cross. I actually have a mare that I tried to breed to include last year, and she happens to have Private Terms as her broodmare sire. And this was one of the reasons I bred her to include, was because he's done this well. A++, this is, again, Truenix. This is the Blood Horses program. Workmix is another nicking service. They have a slightly different algorithm. They use the same data. So if you see here, they're based on the Broad Brush Private Account cross. So they decided they didn't have enough data to stick with include in Private Account and his sons and grandsons. They went back to Broad Brush, his sons and grandsons. But doing that, they got a triple plus, which is their highest rating. And that might be one of the reasons that they went back further, is to give that triple plus, because the stallion farm having more mares with a triple plus rating, because broodmare owners will see it and say, oh my God, I have to breed this mare to include now. So again, same pedigree, same facts, statistics that they're working with. They've come to slightly different conclusions based on it. I've had this up all day, so it won't let me pull up the stakes winners right now because it's logged me out. But Broad Brush with Private Account, there's a couple other graded winners on that cross. Going back beyond include, how relevant those are. Honestly, I think when you can look at just the sire include as opposed to going back, the closer is better. But sometimes you have to go back further, especially with, we have a mare and foal to Golden Lad that just put into a partnership. Golden Lad doesn't have any foals of racing age. So if you did a nick with Golden Lad, it has to go back to his sire, because there's nothing to rank the mating on with him other than his sire.
So George, that's actually a great segue to a question that came from the group. Lauren Floyd asks, what are the first things you look for when you're evaluating a young, unproven stallion, and how much does the race record come into play in that situation? So Golden Lad is a great example. Young stallion. How do you evaluate someone like Golden Lad?
So for me, pedigree is always the place I start. As good as Lad is, he's only an exciting stallion prospect because he has a pedigree that matches it, that explains it. He's by Medaglia d'Oro, who's one of the top 3, top 5 stallions in the country right now. He's out of a mare by Second Dam, I think, is a champion, Eliza, or half sister of the second to the Dam. It's a very deep, strong stallion. That to me is as important as the razor. I want them both. Especially with an unproven stallion. I have breeding to a well-bred stallion who maybe won a race but wasn't a stakes horse. I don't care how well-bred he is. Similarly, a horse like Skipaway a few years ago, people might remember Skipaway. I remember he's the all-time leading earner when he retired or not, but he was close. When the Breeders' Cup Classic, he was an iron horse. He won loads of races for several years, and I would not have bred anybody's mares to him because he didn't have the pedigree to back it up. Taking nothing away from him as a racehorse, but as a breeding proposition, I would have bet against him, because same thing with a mare. I want a nice deep page, and I want something that explains where it's coming from. Which is not to say that occasionally horses like that don't turn into good sires or good brood mares, but I don't have enough money to be breeding to all of them, so I have to pick and choose as carefully as possible, and that means especially in a stallion, I want as much race record and pedigree as I can get. With mares, it's a little different just because of the nature of things. With a mare, I'll forgive race record more than I'll forgive pedigree. There are people that are the opposite, but I'm a pedigree guy. That's how I do it.
So transitioning to a new question.
Yeah.
And this comes from Don Walsh. When you're looking at Include,
yep.
Do you check their state rankings at all? Do you care how?
Not in Kentucky. And rankings, no. Rankings are always a function of purse earnings, which are very easily skewed by one big horse and not necessarily even in a good race. The horses that finished last in the Pegasus this year, I think earned $1 million or something like that. So Jumpstart, who is the best stallion in Pennsylvania and has been for a long time, but his earnings this year are inflated already because he had that big chunk he had Prayer for Relief, I think, ran in the Pegasus, and so got a check for finishing last, and it was a huge check, and so that put Jumpstart on top of the rankings, where he probably would have been anyway, but so the rankings aren't as important to me. What I look for is I like those, the three statistics there, the percentage of stakes winners from foals, and then I like to look at the average earnings index and compare that to the comparable index. So I did a blog post back in the spring, and I looked at value stallions. Include was on there, and Jumpstart and Great Notion are the two local stallions that I put on there too, because both of them have strong percentage 5 and 6% stakes winners from foals, and they both have higher average earnings indices than their comparable indexes, which means that they do better than their opportunities. They move their mares up. They give a mare the best chance she has of getting a good foal, good runner. Another stallion that TK, you and I have discussed is Wigilia in Pennsylvania, who I don't know where he is on the list. He doesn't have very many foals out there. I don't know where he is on the earnings list, but he has, I think, 7 stakes winners from 113 foals, which is a great percentage. And he's not getting good mares. If you look at his average earnings index versus his comparable index, he's much higher. He's moving those mares way up. He's doing things that he shouldn't be doing based on the quality of the mates, which means it's him doing it. So that's a stallion to look at breeding to. Again, the only sort of knock on these horses is they're not commercial. The commercial market doesn't recognize them the same way that it recognizes those first crop stallions. It's an irony, because Golden Lad would be doing great if he ended up with 6% stakes winners and an average earnings index bigger than his comparable index. It's what every stallion owner wants. But if he ends up there, and his babies will sell for less than what they're going to sell for this year when he's a first crop stallion, because I guess there's still the potential that he could be Medaglia d'Oro 2.0. It's just an irony of the commercial market that first crop sires sell better than proven sires.
Everybody likes lottery tickets, George.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. You're buying a lottery ticket, and why makes it easier to shop when you're somebody like Wasabi.
Yeah, exactly. So as we come up on an hour of this, and this has been great, what I wanted to do, we have a couple people that are just on the phone.
Okay.
So what I was going to do is I was going to open up the phone lines. I'll count to 3. Open up the phone lines. If you are if you're loud somewhere, you're at a train station. We had somebody at a train station one time on a train listening. So that's mute yourself. But I'll count to 3. I'll open up the phone lines. If somebody wants to ask a verbal question, that's okay as well. So 1, 2, 3, and I unmute everyone. So if anybody has a question they want to ask verbally, that's fine now. Once again, you can mute yourself if you want to as well. So any questions from anyone on the phone? And we have a shy group. All right, no questions.
Okay, I'll ask a question.
Gary's got a question coming. There we go. I knew I could coax you in, Gary.
It probably answering my own question, but the nicks are fluid because of how the progeny perform, correct?
That is correct. Right. So as more foals are bred on these crosses, as there are more include foals on the private account mares, the nick will change, and how they calculate the nick will change. Work nicks or e-nicks here won't look at broad brush with the private account cross. They'll only look at the include foals, and the way it tends to work over time, those nick ratings are going to go down because everybody with not everybody, but lots of people with, private account daughter or granddaughter who maybe is by one of his lesser sons and doesn't have her own strong family behind her, they're going to breed her to include and say, well, I'm going to try and duplicate this cross that has worked and upgrade my mare that way. And statistically, it doesn't end up working, and it dilutes the cross.
How often do they update the nick rating? Is that real time, George?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
The results go in, I don't know if it's real time or once a week or whatever it is, but it's very quickly. And then the next time that you went in and calculated it, it wouldn't necessarily be, it wouldn't be the same because they'd be working with with more data.
Yep. I got some really good questions coming in, so I'll ask and take it in a different direction totally. And I think this is a great question from Lauren Floyd. How did you get your first job? I think you actually had a job before Country Life, but how did you get your first job at Country Life is the question she asked. And what would be your advice if someone is interested in being a bloodstock agent? What's your answer to that question?
So there's a couple different things there. I got my job at Country Life because I hated being a lawyer, and I sent letters, emails with my resume and my sort of life story to as many different people whose names and addresses I could find that own farms and were in the industry, and said, here's my story.
Oh, that's my fault. I'm sorry. Good, George.
Here's my story. I hate being a lawyer. I want to get back into the thoroughbred business. I know I'm no longer really qualified to do that because I've been practicing as a lawyer. I hadn't done anything hands-on with horses in 5 or 10 years. Country Life was where I finally got somebody who said, okay, come on down here and we'll find something for you to do. My advice to somebody so what I did, I wasn't a bloodstock agent at Country Life. There's a little bit of everything there, and it's what sort of made me realize that I was qualified to be a bloodstock agent. Excuse me, to the extent that I am qualified to be a bloodstock agent. But my advice for somebody that wants to be in the thoroughbred industry is you just have to go and do it. Go to the racetrack and walk hots. That's how my first job in horse racing, I walked hots for Suge McGahee during a summer in college. It meant I slept in the dorms at the racetrack, and I worked 7 days a week, and I was at the barn at 5 o'clock every morning, and I was there all day, and I had no life. But I was in college. It was a summer in college at the time, so I didn't really have a life. It's why I couldn't just do that when I went to work at Country Life. I was married and thinking about having a family, so I couldn't just go live at the racetrack again then. It made it a little different. So depending on where you are in your in your life, in your personal life, in your career, you just have to keep showing up, pay attention, take notes, learn, and when given the opportunity to demonstrate that you've learned something, do it.
Yeah.
And it's nobody's gonna hand it to you. Not even TK. But yeah, it's a hard business to get into unless you're born into it, which is what seems to happen to most of the people in the business. And if you're outside of that trying to get in, you sort of have to start from the bottom or much further from the top than the people that are born into it do. But you can do it.
Yep. I got a series of questions which I'm actually going to answer for you. Both Don and Lauren asked about what are some possible sort of breeding plans for Participate, Campaign Vows, and Waveland. And so let me tell you some of what we're thinking we're going to do. And George and I have actually talked about this a little bit, and so I know I'm not springing something on him. And although we won't give answers tonight, the plan really is that as we get closer into the fall here, over the next 60 days or so, for those that are in those horses, those broodmare programs, we're actually going to create a low, medium, and high kind of mating plan. If we spend this much money, here's what we think we could do. If we spend this much money on a stud fee, this is what we could do. And if we spend this much money, here's what we could do. And so we're going to give a lot of visibility to what our thinking is in that way. And although I don't know if we're going to actually have people voting, we are going to ask people to give their thoughts to it, for sure. And have a lot of visibility and clarity about here's where we're thinking, and this is why we're thinking, and what this means. If you take Participate and you send her to Kentucky for a particular stallion cross, this is what that means. Where if you keep her local and you pick a local stallion, this is what that means. So anyway, that's our plan. Really, there aren't a lot of groups that do that kind of visibility and clarity. Most of the time, if you're in a broodmare sort of syndication, it just kind of happens, and you're stuck with whatever happens, and you don't even know why it happened half the time. It just happens. And we're going to try to do some different kind of stuff there. So that's the answer to that question. And so I would hope over the next 60 days or so, you'll start to see some of those plans. It's probably a smidgen early to get too deep into those, but not too far.
Who else is going to retire to
right
Maryland in the next 2 months? I mean,
yeah. I mean, we just had a retiree, announced 24 hours ago. So I mean, that's something that's going to change. We also for everyone that happens to be on it, you'll hear about it and you'll see it online if you happen to be in WV already. I think we're going to add probably one more broodmare prospect that's not already that everyone knows about. But I think you got one more coming for this season. Even my pocketbook eventually gets taxed. And broodmare prospects, the way we do them today, I can't tell you, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I don't know anybody else that sort of does it the way we're doing it, where there's no ongoing expense for anybody involved, and that the ongoing expense is kind of on us till we get to some kind of fruit. that, you know, it takes a whole bunch of cash to actually let you do that is the short answer. But you know, it's fun, so that's why we're doing it. But we probably have one more coming. George actually went and took a look at one a couple days ago that kind of fell in our lap. That is a very, very unique and interesting story that I think people are going to be very excited about. And if all goes well with the vetting and a couple other checkouts, we're going to have one more to announce in the next week or so. So, and then I think that'll be our probably last one for the season. Famous last words of TK is all I will say. That's sometimes, just like I sometimes say, well, I don't know if we're going to claim any more this weekend, and then magically I claim one. So sometimes these things happen. So a quick question from Don asked for George and/or TK, pie in the sky stuff. What do you think about reintroducing lines that are overseas back to the U.S., particularly Galileo and Sunday Silence via their sons? I'll leave that for you, George.
Oh, thank you. So Sunday Silence, I think, is a much easier. It has a much easier route to success because he was a dirt horse. Even though they run predominantly on turf over in Japan, he himself was a dirt horse. The current example right now, Yoshida, I think is a grandson or great grandson of Sunday Silence. I think he's a fantastic prospect. He's won a Grade 1 on dirt and turf this year. I've seen a couple of people refer to Yoshida as an outcross. He's not really, because his dam is an American runner. She's by something Stormcat line, but so it's not really an outcross, but it's he's a very interesting stallion prospect, and some of that is because of the Sunday Silence, who's been so prepotent over in Japan. But it's not a line that we haven't had here. There's a couple of lines to Halo, More Than Ready being the big one, most successful recently, and he's got a couple of sons out there. Verrazano and Daredevil are young. He'll have Catholic Boy, but it is a line that's been here. Galileo's a little trickier. I would love to see. I wish they had sent Churchill to Ashford instead of Coolmore, Ireland last year, because he would have been a fantastic prospect. He's a bigger, faster European horse than a lot of their stallion prospects. They have a different style of racing over there. Speed is not so important. European horses, you would be shocked at how small European horses are compared to North American horses, especially if you go to the yearling sales. The yearling sales are all about size in the U.S. The bigger, the better for the buyers here, notwithstanding the bigger horses have to carry more weight on legs that are not that much thicker. But and European horses are much neater. We would call them medium-sized as a euphemism. They're also turf. Galileo is turf. So even though turf racing is on the rise in the U.S., they run more turf races every year. There are more turf stakes races. It's no longer sort of the backup plan for a horse that can't run on the dirt. You know, people do just breed turf horses now. One of the problems with Galileo would be the mare population maybe isn't as suited to a son of Galileo. Coolmore has tried. They've had two different sons of Galileo at Ashford. Cape Blanco bred 200 mares his first year, something like that. He's now in Japan, and he's only sired one or two stakes winners from his first few crops, including that huge first crop. Magician is the second one that they brought over. His first crop were only 2-year-olds. He's got one in Europe that's halfway decent, but I don't know. He might have a couple of winners here, but neither one of them has really done very well, and they're both very good racehorses. As sons of Galileo, well-bred sons of Galileo, and they haven't really made it here. Not that 2 stallions is a very large sample size. I know Seville was in Maryland for a couple of years, and he unfortunately died. We looked at some of his yearlings last year, liked the looks of them. They haven't run yet this year as 2-year-olds, really, but you wouldn't necessarily expect that. I would love to see more Sons of Galileo over here. I think the right one will hit. But I also think it's going to take one of them that has some dirt pedigree somewhere, like Churchill, who's out of a Stormcat mare, to work probably with the mare population that's here. It's sort of the analogous situation would have been Sadler's Wells, who's the sire of Galileo, and he has he got a horse named El Prado who came here and was successful. El Prado got dirt horses and turf horses, even though just about every other son of Sadler's Wells only gets turf horses. It's probably luck more than anything that made that happen. But I think there will be a son of Galileo that will get lucky here, and hope they keep trying.
Well, thanks. So I think, yeah, I mean, so after a good hour and 45 minutes or hour and 15 minutes, I thought that was a really great session. Really deep stuff and lots to absorb. And we, like I said, we recorded. So thanks, Mr. George, for doing that. I think what we might do, having listened to this, I think we might have you on again, do another one in the future where we might talk about like a specific cross and, dig deep on something like that, sort of like a 201 class to go with the sort of 101 class that we did tonight.
Maybe once we've made a mating plan for one of these mares, we can sit down and talk it through for everybody.
Yeah, I think it would be fun. I think people would really like it. So, but thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for everybody being in the crowd. Really great questions. And like I said, once again, recorded. So if you came late or missed pieces of it, you'll see this posted tomorrow on our YouTube. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy your fine evening. I'm going to go find some dinner.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.